Hey everybody, it's the Rugby Rant episode 221.
221, dude.
There we go.
221.
Couldn't remember. I've lost my mind officially with these kids. Can't count anymore. It's bad. But anyway, I'm back with the hammer. The OG crew's back. It's been a little while. I gave him his praise on episode 220, but again, I'd like to say thank you, Hammer, for doing all the episodes and interviews you could do while I was away dealing with family stuff. So I really appreciate you, brother.
That's what we do. That's what we do. We help each other out, make sure we got it covered. But it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed doing a number of the interviews, and we're going to get back at those with some coming up. I'm working on some, locking in some guests. It should be a lot of fun. We had Seth Smith last week, so if you didn't have an opportunity to check it, please do. Talked about the Yellow Rose Sevens showcase. That being said, Scott, why don't you put that graphic up again? What the hell?
Yeah, you know what? I tried to load it, and then all of a sudden it just popped up, and there's the graphic. Again, we will be at Reggies the day of the Ireland-New Zealand match in Chicago at that shitty Soldier Field Stadium. But we will be at Reggies doing a live. You're one by 1 point. What can you fucking do?
Hey, that's all right. I wish you had your tie. Oh, that's right. You had it yesterday. But anyway, so we're getting a new stadium here in a couple of years. We should be golden. It will be the creme de la creme in the NFL. That being said, join us at Reggies. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have some great guests. TJ Olson's joining us. Dan Falcon's joining us. Scott, Dan, Sheila going to be staying at Casa Hammer. And then, of course, guys like Dave Fee. It'll be a fiasco anytime he joins. Put on by Norm Smythe, my good buddy from the Chicago Blaze. We'll have a few other guests joining us. Maybe a Bill Baker sighting from what Scott told me. How did that come about?
He saw the clip. I clipped our Reggie's ad in episode 220. He's like, well, one, I'm going to be there for the match, but now I'm trying to work into my schedule to be at Reggie's because you guys are going to be live. So I was like, obviously the more the merrier. We love him. His American Rising is great. Former Eagles overseas. Now he changed to American Rising with him and Johnny Fitz. And, again, we always love our fellow content creators. And last time I saw him, I think was Scotland, USA DC last year.
Yeah.
In the humidity, him and Johnny Fitz. And it's always good to run into these guys and have them on the show. And I haven't officially met TJ face to face. I don't think.
Oh, wow!
I'm pretty sure I haven't. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I haven't.
Yeah, TJ's a blast, man. That dude came into town a couple of years ago. We had a great time. Showed him around the city a little bit, and great day of rugby out here when they had I think it was a WPL. Was that what? Or no, it wasn't WPL. It was the women's elite rugby.
WER.
Yeah, that was out here. And they had the Women's Hall of Fame, or the Rugby Hall of Fame that was here traveling.
Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it was a lot of fun to see. TJ, can't wait to see him for another go round. He will be in all his glory, celebrating. Well, maybe celebrating New Zealand. We'll see what the results are.
Well, that's it. Who is he rooting for? Is he going to be rooting for New Zealand, or is he going to be rooting for Ireland? He is Australian, so.
Oh, he'll be for the Kiwis all day and twice on Saturday. So it'll be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a great weekend. A lot of stuff happened in the city of Chicago connected to rugby that weekend. There's going to be a lot of parties. So if you're in town and connected with a club or an organization, I know the Kennel Club, which is the Hound supporters fan group, is going to be doing one. So if you hop on their Facebook page, I'm pretty sure they'll let you into the party for a fee, whatever the regular fee is. And I know there's a few other events going on around the city. So check back with us. I think we're going to be trying to get some content throughout the weekend. Oh, yeah. Check back with us and see what we have cooking.
Absolutely. And real quick, we're going to do an ad. Our buddy Adam Hughes, his book has dropped. It's Pluck. It's a collection of poems he has published. I am lucky enough to be going to visit our buddy Adam. Happenstance has it that he's doing a reading from Pluck in Sleepy Hollow, which is only about 25 minutes from me. So I'm going to go support our buddy Adam in his writing career. Go check out Pluck. You'll see the website to purchase right below in in the description. And then the next thing we're going to plug real quick is our buddy James Daly, North American Rugby Database, NARugbyDB.com. We're going to be using that today as we talk about the demise, I would call it, of NOLA Gold. Yeah. They said they aren't participating in 2026, but a lot of teams have said that they aren't participating in a particular season and then don't come back. So we're going to be talking about the history of NOLA Gold, what led for them to decide not to play in 2026, and then what we want to see out of NOLA Gold in 2027, and what we want to see out of expansion teams. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about Around the Pitch. Hammer, go for it.
Yeah, I just want to talk about something local. I always like to talk about whether it's local kids clubs, whether it's high school, or whether it's men's and women's club rugby, especially here in the Midwest. And I got to tell you, the club rugby scene in the Midwest has been absolutely phenomenal over the last couple seasons. Number one, we've seen D1 men's clubs really show their strength in appearance in the national tournament. Whether it's the Chicago Griffins, Chicago Lions, of course, St. Louis Bombers won the Natty in 2024. Last year it was the Lions got there and got close. But this year they've added a new element with my own team, the Chicago Blaze, jumping up to the D1. It's been a lot of fun because now there are 3 D1 teams in Chicago. And I think in the larger scope of things for fans that are paying attention to the MLR, what the Hounds have done is a really nice thing. And it's through kudos to Will Maggie and James English, but it's really been Will that's been leading the charge of this lately, as he's now the GM of the Chicago Hounds. And what they're doing is taking a lot of those academy guys and they're sprinkling them throughout these 3 D1 teams in Chicago. And they're finding ways for these teams to support these young guys. So like we're seeing a Calvin Eyrig and a Michael Hand that are playing with the Blaze, and we're seeing, you know, the normal cast of characters with, you know, like a Willis Goodwin and with, you know, guys like Peyton Wall, Peyton's little brother on the Lions, and the Griffins have their own contingent of Hounds academy players. And then what they're going to do is they're actually going to bring the academy and the Midwest Thunderbirds together for a match on the day of the Midwest Championship final at the Chicago Blaze Rugby Club. And so we'll see guys that are, you know, representing the Impalas and the Wolfhounds and the Tradesmen. And by the way, the Impalas jumped to D1 as well. And guys from like, you know, the teams that aren't that don't have a dog in the race, pun intended, in the Midwest final, they're going to be playing the Chicago Hounds Academy. And so I think the point is that they've really done a nice job integrating into the greater Midwest rugby community without creating a lot of consternation or upsetting the apple cart, so to speak, with these teams. These teams are excited to have some of their boys go on and play potentially representative rugby with the Chicago Hounds. And so it's a feather in their cap rather than a detriment to what they're trying to accomplish. So kudos to the Chicago Hounds and kudos to the Midwest. Right now, we don't have the ranking out for week 7, but week 6, St. Louis Bombers on top. Number 1, they're undefeated with it was a big one last week over KC 64-22. The Lions beat Metro 61-17. So that matchup in St. Louis here in a couple weeks time is going to be absolutely just lights out awesome.
They have some fugly guy on the wing though, the Bombers. He's tall, he's
well
lanky.
Yeah, I know, but he has a dad that's pretty good looking for his age.
Shut up. That's so my Around the Pitch, we're going to be talking about Los Condores punches their ticket. Chile punches their ticket to the 2027 World Cup. And it's kind of funny because I'm going to say a name and it'll actually lead into what we talk about in NOLA. It's funny, but Los Condores beat Samoa handily, 31 12 and punched their ticket. And I got to be honest, I was listening to it on YouTube. Somebody had given us a Spanish YouTube feed. So obviously not knowing Spanish, it was a little bit tough, but just hearing the crowd noise. And at one point, the referee was unable to hear the TMO or the assistant referees on the microphone because the crowd noise was so loud. And then afterwards, during the post-match interview, same thing. You couldn't hear the interview because the crowd was so loud, celebrating that that only one spot that South America has for the World Cup the World Cup in 2027, which is weird because I think they gave Asia 2 spots, despite not having any team that had prior World Cup experience. That was weird. So why they take one away from South America? I don't know, but Chile came roaring through, and right off the halftime, Samoa did score from a line out, and Jonah Mau went over, but Samoa missed the conversion. But I said Jonah's name because he's actually, if you look at the all-time record holders, he's the single single season top tackler in 2025 for NOLA Gold last season with 181 tackles on the season. So it's interesting that this time my Around the Pitch topic leads us into what we're going to be talking about soon. Again, we're going to be talking about NOLA Gold. We're going to be talking about a little bit of their history, what led to them deciding to not participate in 2026. What we would like to see out of them in 2027 if they come back, and then what we would like to see for future investors looking to be owners of this team. So we're going to get that right. That's going to be our rant for tonight. We're going to get right to it. So hold on. So, to kick it off, the NOLA Gold, New Orleans Gold Rugby were founded in 2017 and were one of the founding members of Major League Rugby. And up until this next season, they have competed in every MLR season from 2018 to 2024. Owned by Tim Falcon. In 2020, French 14, the top 14 side, ASM Claremont started to own a majority stake, and that was when we started to see after COVID, a lot of minority stakes go to like different unions or different pro teams on some of these MLR teams. And NOLA Gold took part in the first ever MLR game, a 26-35 loss against Houston in Houston, and unfortunately, Houston is another one of those teams that won't be participating in 2026. So let me just kind of go through some stuff. I'd like to go through like their historical performance. In 2018, they went 3-0-5. They had 17 points, 6th place. 2019, they were 9-0-7. 54 points, 5th place. 2020 in the shortened season, they ended in 3rd place with only 16 points. Again, they stopped that. I think, what was it, after week 5? I think they were 3-2.
Yep.
2021, they scored their most points ever, going 10-1-5. That one is a tie. 51 points, and still coming up as 3rd in the Eastern Conference. I believe in 2021 they were still only doing the top 2 in each conference. I don't think they made the playoffs that year. In 2022, they were 4-0-12, 25 points, 5th in the Eastern Conference. 2023, 7-0-9, 35 points, 4th in the Eastern Conference. 2024, they were 2nd in the Eastern Conference and made the conference semifinal their only playoff appearance, going 10-0-6. And in 2025, they were 4-0-12 with 32 points, coming in 5th in the Eastern Conference. Their overall record in the season, 50 wins, 58 losses, 1 tie. Overall playoff record is 0-1. We have some, it was up and down with them all the time, bro.
Yeah, it was. And I think that one of the things that, well, let me just say this, and one of the reasons why NOLA really and Fitz really prided himself on developing American players. They truly, there were several points, I think 2023, 2024, I would say 60% of the roster had American players on it. and you saw a heavy emphasis on Americans throughout Fitz's tenure, and he's still doing that today. He's down there at Loyola, down there right around the New Orleans area, as the director of rugby for men's and women's. That being said, I just want to say this. First and foremost, Tim Falcon is a friend of mine. He put his heart and soul into that team. He was inspired, obviously, by his love of rugby, and he had a vision to put pro rugby into the New Orleans area. That became a reality for 7 seasons. They were great products on the field. Sometimes they came up on the winning end. Sometimes they came up a bit short. Only one playoff game to speak of. But it was a wonderful game day experience in many different ways, and they really incorporated the New Orleans flair. You really got that feeling when you showed up into the tailgate. And kudos to his daughter-in-law, Morgan, and his daughter, Jessica, who both in their own ways just brought their heart and soul into their respective respective spheres of that team. Jessica had a tremendous merch when she ran it. She did a great job in the design and sales, and Morgan always did a great job with the social media component. The one thing I would like to say is, Tim is an attorney and he's quite successful. He has a great practice, but he doesn't have the deep pockets that Marcus Galperin from Miami had. And that's why ultimately he looked for additional investment, and he brought in individuals, a French group. And unfortunately, that French group didn't have the same commitment and vision that Tim did. Tim suffered losses every single season, financial losses every single season. He had to figure out a way to make this sustainable, and that was to bring in additional investment. Unfortunately, like I said, that investment did not have the same commitment to putting a quality MLR product out on the field moving forward in 2026. I'm saddened. I know a lot of fans of rugby, fans of the Gold in New Orleans area, are saddened. It's really too bad that it came to that point. It's too bad that group didn't have the vision that Tim had, didn't have the commitment that Tim had, didn't have the love for that team that Tim had. The Gold are going to be sorely missed.
It's interesting because in 2025, or at the beginning of the season, they announced an influx of more French investment. They appointed Alexandre Maman as the CEO, and then Denton Hunter as the chief revenue officer. And it's interesting because, I'm in business for a living in corporations, and they seem to be putting together a corporate structure that should have led them into a 2026 that was better than 2025. And so to hear that they were leaving 2026 and putting a pause on it after putting up such commitment and creating these officer positions and telling us about all this investment they had, is very disappointing on my end, because either two things one of two things happened. They created these positions, and the people who were then in those positions going through the 2025 season didn't like what they saw, or two, they didn't know what they were doing. I highly doubt they didn't know what they were doing. These are people who've done this in some form or fashion. They didn't just pick guys off the street. But to not see the commitment that the fans have, that away fans have to travel to New Orleans, there's always a big contingent that travel to New Orleans. The Free Jacks fans were talking about how they're very upset that they can't travel to New Orleans, for an away match this season. Same thing. Chicago fans like to travel. The DC fans, that was always a big one for them. So to be an OG team and then put the pause in 2026, it's weird to me. The only thing I could really say about New Orleans' whole time in the MLR is there was a lot of turnover, in certain positions. Fitz was the GM, and then he was the rugby operations, and then he was this and he was that. And I think a lot of the players bought into Fitz, and as certain people moved him out of, maybe, I wouldn't say out of day-to-day operations, but out of dealing with the players less as he was the GM. I think the players lost some confidence in who they were talking to. You also have to realize 4 coaches over those 7 years. Nate Osborne, Kane Thomas, Corey Brown, and Danny Lee. And you talk about Corey Brown in 2024. They make a playoff, and then he's gone. And then Danny Lee comes from the Hounds. Now, Danny, we know Danny. We love Danny. But he didn't really have the setup. He was coming in year 1 with players that he necessarily didn't pick himself, right? That's always the way with coaches, right? In college football and the NFL, they always talk about a coaching cycle is, at minimum 3 years. We don't have the luxury of that. But, the inconsistency in coaching, and even when Kane was coaching, like that 2023 season, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a little bit of is he going to coach 2023? After the 2022 campaign, if I remember correctly. Like, it wasn't set in stone, or at least there wasn't the perception that it was set in stone for 2023 for King.
I actually, from what I've gathered in talking with when I spoke with Fitz, is that actually Kane Thompson stepped down.
Mm-hmm.
I think he felt like after being a head coach for the year, that wasn't his strength. And I say that with all due respect, right? It wasn't his strength. His strength was coaching forwards. His strength was being involved in the tactical components of.
But we've seen that again. To tell us what you've seen guys who are defensive coordinators, offensive coordinators, QB coaches go to the head coaching role and they're not successful.
I think for me, for Kane to voluntarily step down, to come to Fitz and say, look, I don't think this is my best use of my skill set. I'm better off on coaching defense and coaching forwards. That's what I'd like to stick with. It says a lot about the character of the man.
Absolutely.
He was, he wasn't about the ego. He was what was best for the Gold. But going back to your point, I do think I agree. Fitz bled Gold. He bled for that team. I can remember
he sure as shit sweated in that all black fucking suit he wore to every hot game he ever went to. The dude was just sweating like crazy.
But, I know for a fact that there were times he'd go pick up guys up at the airport. He'd go, pick up furniture to provide in some of the housing. He was always working for the lads, always trying to make things better for them, make their experience better. So, I think that in a lot of ways, when Fitz kind of was, for the lack of a better term, he was given the shaft, forced to be taking a back seat. I think that impacted the locker room. I actually spoke with a former player in anonymity, and I kind of asked him if they had any idea of what was going on, and the players said they weren't too sure what made ownership come to that decision, but he was fairly confident they'd be around for a few more years after some of those rumors were kind of circulating. He didn't think it would be true. The new owners always gave the Intervalley Group, Capital Group, Intervalley LLC, always gave the impression that they had all the money in the world and they were, this was like mad money for them. They were just having a lot of fun with it. And by the way, when I was there and met them, I got the same impression, and the fact that organizationally, they were talking about planning for 2031 and really trying to host
that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. They were the first MLR team to say as soon as we won the bid, we want to host. And they weren't stupid about it. They weren't even saying a semifinal or a final. They were saying a couple pool matches down in New Orleans. They knew where they were, how much they were going to get, and knowing that they could probably sell out a 20,000 seat stadium for a pool match.
Right.
So it's
So I really feel like the player voice needs to be heard here in the sense that the team, always felt like a family. This player said the coaches were new, but they were with, many of them, most of them with Taylor and Kane were with him for, quite some time. Taylor, obviously an OG himself with the NOLA Gold. This player just said they felt like they were let down by the owners and they were given false promises by the ownership. And I can speak for some of the members, a member of the coaching staff, and he felt the same way, that there was, I've heard from more than one person that they were in the locker room after a loss. Ownership came in, reamed the new asshole, and told them that they were shit, that their jobs were on the line, this, that, and the other. And then they came back at the end of the rant, pun intended, and said, but we're committed to you guys. And it's like, you're talking out of two sides of your mouth. All the banners and all the catchphrases that are all posted around the locker room, and that it was lipstick on a pig, right?
Well,
it was lipstick on a pig, and it didn't really mean it.
They cited their intent not to participate in 2026, and they said the business model is not working. But the business model never fucking worked, Rob. Like, I don't understand. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. That's not the excuse, in my opinion. And
ask the other owners of any other team, whether it's a team that went defunct or whether it's a team that were still committed to doing it, be it the Hounds or that Utah
Rooney or
Jacks
anybody.
or anybody else. Ask anybody else, and they'll tell you that it's a tough business model right now. I mean, I can remember being involved in some discussions with the MLR, and they said more than one time, you need to make sure that potential investors understand that they're going to lose money for a number of seasons. And so the question is how can you minimize losses? What can you do to put asses in seats? And that, that's the name of the game right now. So for folks that are out there supporting the league that are in MLR cities, or folks that are still want to follow the league and go to a few away games, if you don't have a team in your city, buy tickets, bring some friends. We've got to figure out a way to do what we can to support this league as fans.
And now that we know the Eagles are in for 2027, you would assume that should push more fans to go to MLR games to see these Eagles play.
Yeah.
And that's a selling point. Now, at the time, the New Orleans ownership didn't know, right? I believe we weren't in at that point. But you would think with some foresight, when they're talking about 2026 to the lead up to 2027, you would say, hey, we have this opportunity to maybe get some heat if we go in there and do something. So, like, my point being is, was it maybe a little short-sighted to close up shop right before we qualify, and then they could use it to sell tickets?
Yeah, and by the way, if the goal, especially for the large organization, this Inter Valley Capital, was to always bring in a World Cup, at least some pool matches, like, New Orleans is a city you want to bring in one of those quarterfinals, maybe a semifinal, maybe a final. New Orleans is one of those cities that you want to do that, because it's like Vegas. There's things, it's not just a rugby match that's happening there. It's a destination city to have a great weekend or a great week or 2 weeks or for whatever time that matches are happening there.
3 years.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a reason.
Exactly.
It's the atmosphere. It's doing all the pre Super Bowl stuff. It's going to do those things that are always available, right. But now you're gonna have more of an influx there. And in this particular case, you're gonna have an influx of internationals who've never done it before.
Right. And so I think the big question is, does this new group really think that the MLR and USA Rugby, as closely intertwined as they now are, with the infusion of World Rugby money, with their support of the anthem? No, it's so as close as they are intertwined that the two organizations would say, yeah, let's go ahead and give New Orleans a final or semifinal or quarterfinal. I don't know that I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I see things differently. And I hope, at the risk of offending Tim, I know it was a vision for his. I just think that, this majority group that took over was short-sighted, and maybe they just don't see the forest through the trees like Tim did.
I mean, and we had an NFL game in Dublin, and who's in the suite with Roger Goodell, but Irish rugby players, from the national team.
So, key.
Yeah, like I don't understand what we're doing here, and this is I say that a lot, guys. I say that at 200 episodes, I've said it every episode. Like, in my opinion, leading up to 2027, not necessarily a test match, but you're telling me we can't go and play a match at maybe set up something at Tulane, to have USA versus Canada match or something. Like we can't figure something out where it might not be a big test match, but have something down there to build the momentum to say, hey, we just played a match at Tulane. This is showing the city of New Orleans we can actually pull this off. This, that, and the other thing to build that momentum to 2023 or 2031.
Hosting a November test would be perfect in New Orleans, by the way.
That's what I'm saying, and you get an off
weather-wise
a week where like a school like Tulane is playing somewhere else, or Louisiana Tech is playing somewhere else, and it's like a 10,000 seat stadium. Again, it doesn't have to be a huge match. It could be a USA B squad versus a Canadian B squad at least, and we'd still pack it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How about a USA Chile, some USA Romania, USA
something,
something of that level. So let's kind of move forward and talk a little bit more about the greater picture here and the impact of the NOLA Gold's exit, and we'll talk more about some of the other teams that have exited or merged and how that's changed the complexity and face of this league. But let's move forward and kind of talk about the impact that this has on the MLR as a whole.
Well, overall, right, that's X amount of games that's not going to be played. That's X amount of, like we talked about previously, group trips that supporters trips that aren't going to be done. That's a whole region now with the loss of Miami in the South, so anything south of Raleigh, there's no rugby going on, including in Texas. So like you've had this.
Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild that, at one time you had Miami and you had Dallas and you had, Houston and you had a team in Austin at one time. Obviously you had Atlanta and you had all the deep South was rich, and now we don't have one except for the anthem. I mean, really what's more interesting is the anthem, Charlotte, is the warmest weather team you're going to have for the early spring. And whereas we used to depend upon those Southern teams to host a good portion of those first few weeks of games. And now we don't have that.
Yeah, but we also have lesser teams. So you assume a 12-game season.
Correct.
So that way you can start in March and that way New England's not
exactly.
New England goes to Chicago goes to New England. They each have one.
It's still going to snow sideways in March, but whatever.
Oh yeah, but you have one decently cold game for each of them at home. Then they can go out to Utah. That'll have a little bit of snow, but it won't be crazy. But this was my question in 2020 in episode 2020 was like, you have this whole swath of players who are played professionally in this area. How many of them are actually going to be looking to pick up the trade now in an anthem, or not anymore in an anthem, because anthems going to be stuck with every Eagle they got, but move all the way out to LA, move all the way out to Utah, move all the way up to Seattle, up to Chicago, up, DC, not too far, but still DC, or up to New England. Where do all these guys go?
I think first of all, fans have to, and there's been a variety of opinions on this issue. Fans are just going to have to accept that the league will look different. You can't have contraction like this and not see some changes. And I'm talking about things like production may change, but rosters are going to change. We can either embrace it or we can, complain about it at every corner. I choose to embrace it. I think there's actually an opportunity here, and the opportunity is for us to develop collectively as a larger USA rugby community. And so getting to the core of your question is, I think that you're going to see teams really look within their region to pick up not homegrown talent, but talent that's more localized, right? That has connection to the region. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like, did swaths of people, come to see come to love Luke White and guys like Julian Dominguez? Yes, but there were a lot of people that came to see Peyton Wall and Noah Brown because they're local guys. There are a lot of people that come to see those guys that have come, from local universities or have played with the local rugby program. So getting back to the around the pitch point I made earlier, the fact is, I think there's a stronger, like at least in Chicago, from my perspective, there's a stronger club connection with the Hounds. And so you're going to see, some of these guys making a lineup, or at least in the training squad, or, get, and some opportunity to play on that, 23-man roster the season. You're going to see a lot of clubs come out to support guys that they played with, because so that they can say, hey, I played with that pro player. He was my 8-man, or he was my flanker, or he was my fly half, or he was my 15. And so I think that connection and that bond with the local rugby communities, if done right, can actually create strength in the region and in and around these MLR clubs.
I have one question. I wonder, we signed a multi-year deal with ESPN to be on ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
Again, a deal in which we are, in my opinion, just giving away the product for free based upon what me and you know to be the deal. Do you think there's a parachute clause there now that there are only 7 teams in the league? We contracted 4 teams. Before they were looking at X amount of games, this amount of and they were paying us a fee. An upfront fee. If I'm ESPN, do I go and say I want to restructure that part of the deal because you're not giving me the 11 teams that we talked about from last year?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on at the front end of the deal, any cash, and we kind of know the number.
Mm-hmm.
But the cash that was received by the league, if that was a one-time cash, initial outlay, then it's already that spend has already happened. So it's no sweat off of ESPN's back to continue to do what they do. I mean, they really, what do they have? 5 games on ESPN2 plus playoffs in the final. Mm-hmm. They really didn't. I don't know that they did a lot to promote the MLR on ESPN.
They don't. They don't promote it. They don't promote any of it. But they show fucking. They had the North American hacky sack. I'm not joking. I'm not joking when I say this. I was watching the women during the World Cup, and ESPNU was showing. I kid you not. The United States national Quidditch team playing. Wait for it, Rob. Playing the United States developmental Quidditch team. Now, have you ever seen the Eagles play a developmental Eagles side against each other on ESPN? But they're playing fucking Quidditch. And there's a developmental national team for Quidditch. So, so here's the worst part, though. Quidditch has a fucking national pathway. What the fuck do we have?
Yeah, right. So I guess my point is there's really, they're not being put out at all in this next season. So I don't know that there's any great loss to ESPN with the kind of contraction of the league. It will be interesting to see what that product looks like. And it was even more interesting to see this week that TRN Plus is going away. So TRN is going back to what it originally was, which is basically
because they lost free
streaming service, because they lost their premium, the premium package that people were willing to pay for in the United States. So on the broadcaster production, will really be interesting to see what transpires. And how much you want to bet?
How much you want to bet at the end of this year? Because I think it was a 2-year deal. They don't renew with ESPN Plus.
Yeah, we'll see. And ESPN has a lot of advantages. I'm not poo-pooing ESPN. I just don't. One of the things that really, for me, was a bummer in this last season with that deal was I didn't, they can't tell me that with the power of the company like ESPN that they can't include any kind of matrix that figure out, like, what do you watch? Well, I watch rugby all the time streaming.
An algorithm. You want an algorithm like
an algorithm. And they can't figure out an algorithm that puts MLR on the front left-hand side of my ESPN app so that all I got to do is click on MLR and I can watch whatever game that I want to watch, right? And that algorithm plays true for people that are casual watchers. So now they click and they say, oh, I know that the Hounds are on Hammer or Scott told me about this game or that game that I should watch this. They click on it once, and all of a sudden that sucker slides farther over to the left so that it's more in front of them than Quidditch.
Well, it goes back to, well, unfortunately, ESPN Plus doesn't do an algorithm like social media. But even social media, like if you go to YouTube, MLR is not in my algorithm. How crazy is that? I put up rugby content. I put up rugby shorts. And we only have like 75 people following us on YouTube. But sometimes our rugby shorts hit 1,000 views with 1,000 unique views. So that means it's going into other people's algorithm based upon the content. So you wonder what the teams and the league are doing to not do that on social media, because I don't see it. So how are they not in my in my algorithm is crazy. Anyway, so let's give this final thought. What do you want to see from New Orleans? 2026 is over. Obviously, somebody has toppled the New England Free Jacks. Finally, most likely the Hounds. Let's be honest. What do you want to see from NOLA Gold going into 2027?
Well, I'd like to see him return. I just don't know how realistic that is. What we're being told based upon their last social media release was that they're going to focus on youth programming. And by the way, Steve Perrell's done an amazing job, not only training refs, but also getting, youth involved in rugby in the greater New Orleans area, specifically in Jefferson Parish. He's doing yeoman's work. So hats off to him. Kudos to him. But, I think, what does that lead to? I think there's got to be a greater emphasis on, so you're playing rugby. Where does that take you? There's no team in New Orleans, right? So there's no bright shining star to point to like the North Star to say, hey, this is what you're aspiring to, kids. You're going to get free tickets to NOLA Gold game. And oh yeah, your coach, Matt Harmon, or you're the crew coach, Malcolm May, or, whomever you've been working with from the NOLA Gold in the fall or whenever you're playing, they're out on the field. So you can develop if you stick with it and become that. They're really going to have to do a lot more work to create the connection with the local university pathway. Obviously, Fitz is involved in that, but I got to be honest. Fitz has been he's been a soldier, tried and true, and he's been a guy who won't say a negative thing. But if I'm Fitz, how much would I be willing to build that bond with what's, with that effort that's coming out of the Intervalley Capital Group? I just don't know that I would have a lot of strong feelings, and that would be a focal point or important point for me. You could just easily go around and find the players at and they're playing in some all-star games around the area, and you pluck guys out of there. For your men's team, you pluck women's, girls that are playing too out of the women's team, and you recruit them to come to your university. You don't really need to use the organization and what they're doing, other than, they provide a host for those events, and you bring them into your organization if they show promise.
I think the biggest thing that NOLA could tell me that say 2027 they're coming back and be successful is improvements to the gold mine. If they come in and say, we're going to do a capital improvement of the gold mine.
Yeah, their lease is up. There's going to be a capital improvement on the gold mine by Jefferson Parish, but it's going to be, it's going to be a multi-purpose effort. The lease ran up on the gold mine, and that I've been told that wasn't really a big deal, but I can't help but thinking that it is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Where else are they going to play, right? And the problem was Tad Gormley Field, which is right in the middle of City Park, right on the western edge of City Park, is I think a 20,000 seat, 10,000 seat stadium. I can't remember, but they play high school football there. It's in a great location because it's super accessible from the city of New Orleans. And it's in a beautiful park and a beautiful area. The problem is it needs improvement to play.
26,500, by the way, 26,500.
There you go. So, and if they put and invested money into it to make it a multi-use facility that included rugby, so that they could actually, and right now it's a high school football stadium. So then, if the Gold were to come back and play in a pitch like that and were to be developed for rugby, then it would be able to be used in the spring as well. And, if that did happen, would that be a place that you could have a tier 2 game in 2031? Absolutely. But some significant improvements would have to happen in order for that to occur. But the gold mine is, I don't foresee the gold mine as being the future. If the NOLA Gold come back, I foresee other opportunities, other options on the horizon, if they do make a return in 2027.
Well, to finish my point, if they decide to do capital improvement, a groundbreaking something, that would show me that all that bluster they talked about is real. Obviously, I want them back in the league. Obviously, I think the Falcons need to be heavily involved because it is passion. And from what we know and how these leagues develop, it's the passion that pushes you forward. And sometimes when the corporate structure gets a little too big for its britches, it doesn't see the forest through the trees, in my opinion. So, Rob, let me just I'll give you the floor for the next couple minutes, and just lay it all out there. Give us a final thought
on the gold itself, or on kind of a
and
bigger picture.
However you want to do it, brother.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm wearing an OG shirt from the first season, 2018, by the NOLA Gold. I'd love to see them return. I think it's a great destination city. There's passionate fans. They've got a great club atmosphere. The one thing that they probably need to figure out if they make a return is how to bring in, Norfolk, the New Orleans Rugby Football Club, get them into D1 so that there's a more of a platform for players to make the transition and develop into professionalism. But they need a commitment, and they need a commitment to have a professional rugby and the willingness to sustain some losses into 2031. Obviously, I think 2031 is an important year, and NOLA could play a huge part in that. By that I mean New Orleans, Louisiana, and the NOLA Gold could be a trigger, a lightning rod for it. But I just don't know how the other owners would feel about some of these teams returning. I mean, it'd be like this if it's okay. So Cam Dolan explained to me this way, and he wasn't critical. He just said, it's like your girlfriend for 5 years says to you, "Hey, look, I want to take a break, and maybe with the option to get back together in a year." So, what are you going to do? Are you going to go, "Oh yeah, let's revisit it in a year after taking a break because you want to look at other options," or are you going to go, "You know what? Go pound sand"? So I kind of think that's, if I were one of the other owners, I'd go, "Look, you couldn't stick with it through the tough times. You know what? Go pound sand. We're not interested." In that larger scheme of things, I think there's an opportunity for the remaining teams to consolidate from a point of strength, to really go back to the MLR's roots. And I think part of those roots, while it is a business entity looking to turn a profit at some point, by and large, we know that there were owners that got into this league because they wanted to develop American rugby players. And I think there's an opportunity to do that in this current form or fashion. They can be leaner, they can be meaner, they can be more efficient, and they can kind of go back to the drawing board. And one of the things I think they need to do, rather than spread all this effort across the United States, is focus on cities that have teams and really work on developing youth rugby in those cities, in those areas that have MLR teams. And I know that's going to irritate a lot of rugby fans out there. Unfortunately, there's a limited amount of money that are going to be able to spend on capital and on improvements and developmental pathways. Somewhere less than $50 million coming from World Rugby. That is not going to go very far if you try to spread it across 50 states and spread it across all the different clubs, youth programming around the United States. Operate from the point of strength, focus on the cities that have MLR teams, try to bring rugby in those regions. And this is kind of what the PLL based its model on. Focus on areas where rugby is strong, from top to bottom, from youth to high school to college to club and professionalism, where there's that straight line from bottom to top, and focus on cities that have that sequence, that have that trajectory, so you can really make rugby strong in those areas, and then build out from there and then grow from there.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if you go to the Play Rugby website, there's a list of 40 people, and like 20 of them we know personally, who are the representatives in their states for Play Rugby. So get involved, call your state rep, start a play rugby program, bring it up in your PTA meetings, bring it up as the touch rugby portion of what do they do in gym class, because they're always looking to do. I mean, we used to do Thai Bo in gym class when I was younger because they were trying to mix things up, and they put in that Billy Blanks. Yeah, they put in that Billy Blanks DVD, and you do some Thai Bo because the kickballs and the dodgeballs and the butts up and all that stuff, like it was getting old, So they were trying to put in new ways to get kids active, and this is definitely a way to bring kids active. The only thing I'd say, Rob, is I'd refute this what Cam said a little bit, only because New Orleans has stuck through it for so long and was an OG. You got to give them a little bit of leeway if they want to come back. That's all I'm saying, because they stuck it through COVID, they stuck it through the fucking Gilchrist era, they stuck it through the first season when everything was kind of buck wild.
Tim Falcon did.
I think regardless, I think the club itself earned some currency. The club itself earned some currency, is all I'm going to say. But anyway, guys, that's the end of episode 221. Can't believe we've done 221 of these, if you include every RPK we ever did, and all the episodes I don't think we put a number on. We're probably up to like 300 or 400, right?
Oh God, yes. We've probably done 150 interviews at least. So, it's a big number over the last 5 years. It's a pretty amazing run when you think about it. But we're going to continue to deliver content. Let us know who you'd like to get on the show, who you'd like to see on the show. If you have a topic, drop us a line. We'd love to talk about it. We'd love to get you on. I mean, Absolutely. Scott and I talk all the time, but it's always fun to get new faces and fresh thoughts onto the screen and bring it to the fans, because ultimately that's how we got our start. We wanted to give the fans a voice. And it can't be done without fans willing to step up and provide their voice, and speak out on the things that they're passionate about with regard to rugby in North America.
Yeah. I mean, if you're tired of hearing Rick Collins like I am, join the show as a guest and then you can bump him right off. I'm just joking. I love you, Rick. But anyway, guys, that's episode 221 done and dusted. I'm the big guy, Scott Ferrara. That's Rob the Hammer Hammerschmidt. We're 1 week closer to our live show, 1 week closer to New Zealand versus Ireland at that shitty place called Soldier Field in that shitty town called Chicago. Go Pack Go. I'm the big
Join us at that great place called Reggies, though.
Absolutely. Other than that, Rob, okay.